Funding for the production of Folks is made possible in part by a grant from Union National Life Insurance, serving Louisiana and the South since 1926, a family-managed corporation providing whole life insurance.
Straight ahead on Folks, a look at a leadership conference in Baton Rouge, where Louisiana's black legislators air their concerns for the upcoming legislative session. We'll also travel to East Carroll Parish, just north of Lake Providence, Louisiana, to take a look at Panola Pepper Corporation, a growing Louisiana business that started out with a mother's home recipe for hot sauce. All this and more on today's edition of Folks. Hello everyone and welcome to Folks. I'm Sonya Masingale. These are times of great controversy in Louisiana. Things have rarely been as tight economically, and our state's future progress relies heavily on the decisions and actions of our state officials during the upcoming legislative session. Recently, a leadership conference was held here in Baton Rouge at Southern University entitled To Form a More Perfect Union, which allowed Louisiana's black legislators an opportunity to interact with each other and the community and air their concerns for the upcoming legislative session in hopes of finding more effective ways of working together. Here's what they had to say.
According to veteran legislator Alphonse Jackson of Shreveport, the major issues to face the 1988 Louisiana Legislature was centered on the state's fiscal problems.
There will be, of course, attempts to reduce programs and services by cutting out programs and, of course, by reducing the budgets. And I think that we have to examine rather carefully those actions, those coming from the legislature and those recommended by the new administration.
Jackson says we can expect to see packages of legislation dealing with campaign finance reform and education reform. But if education reform includes consolidating all of the higher education boards like Governor-elect Buddy Roemer has suggested, Jackson says look for a lot of battle from the legislative black caucus.
I do not believe that I can forget many of the things that happened when we had one board as it relates to Southern University and Grambling State University, as well as some of the other colleges and universities. And I do not believe that the day-to-day affairs of higher education can be managed effectively by one board.
State Representative Raymond Jetson of Baton Rouge sees a lot of guerrilla warfare taking place in the legislature this year. And he says there are 5 major issues that lawmakers will have to deal with.
But the 5 major areas of concern in the upcoming session to me are, number 1, money. Number 2, budgetary shortfalls. Number 3, money. Number 4, deficits. And number 5, and most importantly, money. All of the other issues in some way or another revolve or evolve about money. And this revolution that we've experienced has brought about the revelation that we don't have any money.
Jetson says he is not afraid to tighten the belt as far as state finances are concerned, but he admits he is worried about budget cuts.
We have a mood in the legislature that says, okay, it's all right to cut it now. Those things that we had problems with the last 4 years because the little fellow on the 4th floor or the little fellow in the mansion wouldn't go along with. It's okay now. Just as Ronald Reagan created an atmosphere in this country where it was okay to be a bigot again Buddy Romer's election has created an environment that says it's okay to tell them they've had enough. We don't have to give it anymore. We don't have to supply these services anymore. And the theory of reducing the size of government, I have no problem with. It's the practice of reducing government that scares the hell out of me.
Representative Diana Bajoie of New Orleans shares Jetson's fears.
Yes, there is waste in the government, but it's not the places where we normally look. We like to say there's waste in Charity Hospital, especially the charity system in New Orleans. But if, for those of you who are familiar with the charity system, we know there's not waste. There is not waste in that system. Sure, there's room for improvement. And I'll be the first to say we need to improve the system. It can work better. But improvement is not privatizing that or contracting out those services.
Senator William Jefferson of New Orleans is chairman of the Legislative Black Caucus. Like Jetson and Bajoie, he too is concerned about budget cuts being proposed by Governor-elect Romer.
We're not unmindful of the fiscal problems of the state, and we're not unwilling to join to try and make things better. We have joined in cuts, in cutbacks, and cutouts, everything. We have voted for all kinds of things. Some of it we had to hold our nose to vote for. Some of it we've led the fight to cut. And we've also voted for increased revenues. We're prepared to look at everything and vote and make changes as need be. We're not unmindful, unprofessional legislators. We know the problems that are there, and we're willing to address them. But we cannot abrogate basic obligations and responsibilities that the state has to the people of our state without making an appropriate response to them. We cannot simply say cut, 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 and let that be the way we go about doing our business. The opportunity to do that is not there. This has not been a spendthrift legislature. We have cut in the last 2 years almost $1 billion from state government. We don't have that much left to cut. The reality of it is we've got to look at restructuring our revenues if we're going to have any kind of state government that responds to the needs of people.
According to Senator-elect Cleo Fields of Baton Rouge, it is going to take a lot of working together to solve many of the state's problems.
It's going to take a spirit of cooperation. It's going to take working hand in hand. I firmly believe in my heart and my mind that the people in District 14 elected me to the legislature, not to go there and fight and fuss, but try to sit around the tablehood of brotherhood and put the people of Louisiana first. And whatever needs to be done, then get it done. I'm just sick and tired, and I saw it as I guess a layman, and also as a student, and a person from the outside looking in. The legislature meeting on an annual basis and nothing being accomplished. I think it's incumbent upon us as legislators to be about the business of taking care of business.
It seems as if budget cuts and other financial concerns will dominate much, but not all of the upcoming session. Earlier this month, we invited representatives of 2 lobbying organizations into the studio to further discuss the special concerns for the session. Joining us in the studio to further discuss special issues in the current legislative session is Sibal Taylor. She's the assistant to the president of the Louisiana AFL-CIO, and Ed Hardin, who's the president of Common Cause Louisiana. And Common Cause, I might add, was the group that sponsored the To Form a More Perfect Union session that we just saw on tape. Welcome to folks.
Glad to be here.
I'll start with Mr. Hardin. For those viewers that are not familiar with Common Cause, would you please tell us a little bit about your organization?
Common Cause is a national organization that was founded in the late 60s and early 70s by John Gardner, who was Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, because Mr. Gardner felt that it was important that the people have a lobbyist, because everybody was represented in Washington except the people. And Common Cause has grown, especially out of scandal in Washington in the Watergate era, and is now a very strong national organization that represents the common interest of all citizens in good government.
So would you say that your organization is kind of a watchdog for all politicians?
Very much so. And in the state, we do perform that same kind of function. And the tape that you have from the seminar To Form a More Perfect Union is part of the Common Cause effort to do a minority outreach. And we are a leader nationally in expanding the base of Common Cause into minority areas.
Mrs. Taylor-Holt, for people who aren't familiar with AFL-CIO, would you tell us a little bit about your organization? Then we'll get into the issues.
Sure. The AFL-CIO is the American Federation of Labor and the Congress of Industrial Organizations. Now, most people think that's a union. Honestly, we are not. We are the political arm and the parent organization for unions, and we serve as their legislative lobbyists for workers of the state of Louisiana.
On the agenda, Mr. Hardin, for Common Cause in the upcoming session, what are the things that you're going to be looking out for?
One of our prime goals is campaign finance reform, which we've worked hard on for a number of years. And I anticipate that there will be campaign finance reform legislation passed very early in this session, especially since this administration has dedicated itself to that particular objective. And the form that it will take will be something that we'll be very much concerned with.
By campaign reform, you mean better reporting procedures for money gathered for campaign purposes, or what does that mean?
Both better reporting procedures and limitations on how money is raised and how money can be spent.
I wasn't aware that that was a particular problem of Louisiana.
Well, it's not particularly a Louisiana problem, but like everything in Louisiana, when we do it in such style that it can become quite acute.
Ms. Taylor, what will the AFL-CIO be looking out for in the current session?
Well, our interests are varied. The first thing, of course, is a labor issue called the Prevailing Wage. The Prevailing Wage, as you may know, is the law it's a state law patterned after the federal Davis-Bacon Act, which says that construction work done in this state has to pay what's called a prevailing wage rate, not the union rate, not the non-union, but the average of those two. We've always supported that concept because it ensures us that Louisiana workers will get the work done here. Besides that, this state is in such a financial crisis that we don't anticipate that there'll be much state construction going on. So primarily, most of the federal construction that's being done here is done under Davis-Bacon. It will not save the state any money to repeal that law, but it will take away some jobs from Louisiana workers. The other area that, of course, we are vitally concerned with is social services. As you know, with the budget cuts and particularly with the splitting of DHHR, we fear that not only the jobs of Louisiana workers will be infringed upon, but also social services will be, detrimentally affected. So we're going to be watching the outline that they've put forward in terms of splitting DHHR to make sure that, first of all, services are delivered as effectively and as efficiently as possible. And we, of course, would like to save as many jobs for Louisiana workers as possible.
How effective has the AFL-CIO been in the past in getting their agenda items addressed in the way that they want to have them addressed?
Very. I'm very proud to say we've been very effective and very fortunate. We don't ever take away, the aspect that a lot of good fortune had to play with it. But prior to 1976, in terms of workers of Louisiana, we had no anti-labor legislation. With the conservative surge that hit the country, obviously it hit the state of Louisiana, and all of a sudden, workers was the beating dogs or the whipping dogs for this state. And once again, while we're suffering through financial crisis, it's being, budget is being cut on the backs of the workers. We're very concerned about that. We do not see where putting people out of jobs is going to help the economic state of Louisiana. For every, for every worker that loses a job, how much in taxes is lost? They're now on the rolls of the state, for food stamps, for sometime welfare.
And unemployment.
Unemployment, the hospital system. So we don't see where cutting jobs is going to help the economy of the state. We should be trying to do everything possible to increase jobs in this state.
Mr. Hardin?
The economic situation is obviously something that is of concern to Common Cause, because what we're facing now with this administration, because of the vast budget deficit, that very few people realize that it wasn't just something that was talked about in a campaign or something that was talked about in a lawsuit. There is a real budget deficit in the order of $1.6 billion that the state of Louisiana faces. And despite the work of the legislature in the last special session, that problem has not been adequately addressed. and there are concerns that grow out of that legislation itself that are of concern to Common Cause, because one of the things that we stand for is openness and accountability in government, and that legislation, as passed by the legislature, does not provide for any of the safeguards that we're used to, that we fought very hard, in fact hand in hand frequently with the AFL-CIO, to ensure open government. We are a government of law and not of men, and all of the analogies that are made about the revolution are good analogies, because there are bad things that can come from revolutions too. And what we need to do is be sure that the objectives of the revolution remain the objectives of the people.
Okay, am I correct in saying that both of your organizations do a certain amount of lobbying, so to speak, to get your issues
That's absolutely correct.
addressed? How does one lobby?
How does one lobby?
How does one lobby?
Okay. When bills are introduced, all right, we research those bills to find out what's the origin, what's the background, what is being purported to be handled by that legislation. After we do research, we take a position on that bill, either for or against it. And at that point in time, we try to convince legislators. We talk to them. We give them the benefit of our research. We give them how that legislation will affect, positively or negative, the people of this state. And we try to convince them that if it's a negative effect, not to indeed put it into law. If it's a positive effect, of course, we want them to make the bill a law. And that's basically what lobbying is, talking to senators and representatives and trying to convince them to your side or your opinion.
So what do? You corner them in between sessions and say, hey, look, I've got these papers, read it? Or do you go into more depth than that?
There is more depth that we bring to it in the sense that we are a citizens lobbying organization, and the big test of whether or not we are for or against an issue is that we always remain in the same economic position, win, lose, or draw, as an organization. We are very much in favor of, in Common Cause, the involvement of individual citizens, to the extent that an individual citizen takes the initiative to know what his government is doing. That individual can bring his point of view to his legislators, and it's very, very important that legislators have the input from their constituents so that their constituents will be properly represented in the legislature. And I think that that's one way that we would differ slightly from the more professional approach that's taken by AFL-CIO. We obviously, with a budget of $25,000, don't have a lot of lobbyists available. But what we do is, one of the things that we do is encourage ordinary citizens to exercise their rights as citizens, to petition the government through their senators and representatives for those things that they favor.
Okay, let's take that a step further for our viewers who are not politically active but might be interested if something comes up and they want to have their opinions voiced. What should they do?
You know, when I first went to work at the legislature in 1972, there were 8 telephones on the floor of the House, and they were all in little pay station type affairs. Today, every legislator has a telephone on his desk in both the House and
That's
the
right.
Senate. And there are toll-free numbers that are available so that anybody in the state can contact a legislator almost immediately with any concerns that that person has. And we encourage that those telephone lines be used as much as possible.
So a telephone call does count.
It counts even more than sometimes mass mailings that take place where everybody signs the same postcard over and over again. It's that one-to-one contact which ultimately is the most telling in the way our legislators vote, because they are responsive to their constituents.
Would you agree with that, Ms. Taylor-Holt?
Well, definitely. You know, we try to also to encourage workers and their families to get down there to the legislature, to see what's going on. The bill Mr. Hardin was alluding to is that Louisiana Recovery District. And I honestly believe this state does not understand what that will mean to the average person in the state of Louisiana. They have set up a commission that will be able to tax the people of this state without the consent and or knowledge of the people. You know, this commission, this task force will be able to impose a tax or a fee, call it what you like, a rose by any other name is still a rose, on the people of this state without their knowledge and or permission, which has never been the case before. You know, and people need to get involved with these kind of issues, because before you know it, something will have happened and they'll wonder, well, where did that come from? You know, but they have to keep up with it. They have to make phone calls. They have to write letters, you know, and let their legislators and their senators and representatives know that they are concerned about what's happening in this state.
Thank you very much. We're out of time for this segment, but I do appreciate you for giving your time to be on, folks. And we'll be following with what's going on.
Glad to be here, and thank you, Sonya.
Thank you for having me.
Our next feature introduces us to Panola Pepper Corporation, a North Louisiana business that has grown by leaps and bounds in a seemingly short period of time. Although their products are coming to worldwide attention, we see here that Panola is still a down-home business that started from an old family recipe. 5 miles north of Lake Providence, Louisiana, tucked beneath stately oak trees, is the home of Panola Pepper Corporation, a cottage industry gone international. It all started here, in the kitchen of Mrs. Martha Wiley Brown, from a hot sauce recipe she brought here over 30 years ago from Baton Rouge.
It was in my mother's family. She made it as kids. We ate it. We called it Mama Sauce. And she would make it up in the summertime and put it in a pantry in gallon jugs, and we would pull it out and use it as we needed all through the year. And we always noticed that the last jug we pulled out was the oldest, and it was always the best.
Martha Brown's son Bubba inherited the recipe and the family farm after World War II. Brown started making small quantities of hot sauce as gifts for family and close friends, but as it will happen with hot sauce in Louisiana, the demand began to increase as friends offered to buy larger quantities of the sauce.
Everybody just liked the product, and all our friends kept encouraging us. And being farmers, we only work 8 months out of the year. We get through harvesting our crops around Thanksgiving, and we have about 4 months, 30% of our time, left to hunt or do nothing. And we have a lot of farm labor that we didn't have anything for them to do. So this is one of the ideas that prompted me. Besides, my friends were tired of asking me for the hot sauce, and they said, well, look, we'd rather buy it. We'd rather buy it, make it and sell it to us. So we decided that, plus having the farm labor, not doing anything for 4 months, and having this house available also. So we said the initial cost of going into business would be very minimum, we thought.
Then came the fire that wiped out their informal factory located in the kitchen of the old family house.
As things happened, we had a terrible fire in November of that year. It burned everything down. We lost all of our hot sauce, and that was aged, ready to go. We lost all of our inventory, machinery, the old home. And so from there, we had to get our thoughts back together and decide whether we were going to try to do it again. And it was a tough decision, and we just had a lot of encouragement. People still got behind us and said, we think it'll go. We think you have a good product.
Since the fire, Panola has become a multifaceted company, producing not only the traditional family recipe hot sauce, but 4 new sauces have also been introduced to the product lines.
Make a Louisiana hot sauce that our brand is called Cajun hot sauce. And we simply use cayenne peppers, aged cayenne peppers. They have to be a year old. 9 months to a year old. We don't use anything any younger than that. And then we just grind this pepper mash up in vinegar, salt, and pepper mash, and that's a Louisiana hot sauce.
After the ingredients are blended and cooked, the sauce is aged in barrels for at least a year. There are also Cajun seasonings and ready mixes, whole traditional dishes in bags that only require the addition of water or meat and seafood. These mixes were developed for the fast-paced lifestyles of the 80s.
We were out to California on a what we call a vacation for 5 days. While we were there, of course, we always go to grocery stores, look around, and we saw some beans out there and some ready mixes. What they were doing in California was packaging the beans and products in a little bag with the spices in there for most of the housewives work. And when they come in, they don't want to chop up the celery and the onions and garlic to do the cooking. So this is where we got the idea from. This was about 2 years ago.
Much of the success of Panola products can be attributed to the quality of the products, but the quality depends upon the loyalty and care of the Brown family and their employees. Doris Newson has worked for Panola since the business began.
This is going on my 6th year here at Panola. And when we first started out, it was 4 employees, and we used to work in the house. And everything we had to do it by hand, from washing bottles and hand labeling the pepper sauce. And we went from the house into to the outside. You know, he had built a bigger building. And when we got a bigger building, he hired more employees. So we went from 4 to about 8. And then we just got bigger and bigger.
Panola has already branched out into the international market. You can now buy Panola products in Canada, parts of Europe and Asia, and there are plans to expand into the Middle East.
We're working overseas in the export business into Belgium, France, Germany, England, Japan. We have a tentative deal that we're working going into China. Quite a few different areas. You have to attack the food business in a broad area because it's such a broad business. It's unlike anything else you'd ever be in. Louisiana products are known worldwide, and we've tried to develop a product line that is the best of Louisiana.
The future looks very bright for this Louisiana business, encouraging others to become innovative during tough economic times. And it all began in Mrs. Brown's kitchen. Thanks to photographer Chuck Simmons for that story. We close today's program with music that brings to us a reminder that it's time again for the Tourget de Beauce National Piano Competition here in Baton Rouge at Southern University. The competition is sponsored by the Southern University Division of Music for the 14th year. The featured de Beauce artist this year is Joyce Johnson of Atlanta, Georgia, and the events of the competition take place at Southern University on Friday, April 29th and Saturday, April 30th. For more information about the de Beauce competition, call 504-771-3440. That's it for this week's program. See you next week for another edition of Folks. Bye-bye.
Funding for the production of Folks is made possible in part by a grant from Union National Life Insurance, serving Louisiana and the South since 1926, a family-managed corporation providing whole life insurance.